It's an unsolved, very real murder that has become fake news. For months, right-wing media outlets have floated unproven claims that a young DNC staffer who was murdered last year leaked thousands of DNC emails and his murder was retribution. Now, there's zero evidence, but that hasn't stopped the story's spread. Tom Foreman reports on the anatomy of a conspiracy theory.
I heard 2 gunshots the other night.
D.C. police have spent months investigating the murder of 27-year-old Seth Rich, and they believe it was a botched robbery that happened as he walked home late at night. The unsuccessful hunt for his killer, a frustration for them and the victim's family.
We will find his murderer.
But former Republican Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, claimed over the weekend with no evidence that the case may be about something more sinister.
This young man who worked for the Democratic National Committee, who apparently was assassinated at 4 in the morning, having given WikiLeaks something like 53,000 emails.
It was an explosive charge, a conspiracy involving WikiLeaks, the Democratic National Committee, and assassination. One big problem, though, it's not true. In fact, the whole crazy theory had already been debunked by CNN and other news organizations when Gingrich made the claim. But Gingrich wasn't alone. He had only joined a flood of right-wing conspiracy theorists pushing the notion.
There's a possibility this is a guy who provided to WikiLeaks all those DNC email.
Then he was shot in the back.
And with no proof, they even suggested the young murder victim may be to blame, claiming he was so angry at his own party for some reason that he handed over the emails to get even.
If it was true that Seth Rich gave WikiLeaks the DNC emails, wouldn't that blow the whole Russia collusion narrative that the media has been pushing out of the water?
Where did these wild theories come from? From veiled hints from fugitive WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, from a FoxNews.com story citing an unnamed alleged federal source, and from this private detective who says he's never seen the emails, never seen Rich's computer, yet
it's very consistent for a person with my experience to begin to think, well, perhaps there were some email communications between Seth and WikiLeaks.
The U.S. government invests a lot of money in spy clouds.
In yet another bizarre twist, the notorious hacker known as Kim.com, seen here in an interview with Russian state TV, claims he has the evidence. Why won't he produce it? He's fighting extradition to the U.S. for conspiracy, racketeering, and money laundering. But in a statement on his website said, if my evidence is required to be given, I would need a guarantee from Special Counsel Mueller on behalf of the United States of safe passage from New Zealand to the United States and back. Seth Rich's family sent a cease and desist letter to the private detective and yesterday pleaded in a statement to Sean Hannity that read in part, "It is a travesty that you would prompt false conspiracy theories and other people's agendas rather than work with the family to learn the truth." With that, the story seemed to finally lose one of its biggest champions.
Out of respect for the family's wishes for now, I am not discussing this matter at this time.
Even so, today, the story lives on.
There's still some question as to whether the intrusion at the DNC server was an insider job or whether or not it was the Russians.
Yet what evidence? I'm sorry. What, the insider job, what are you referring to here? Because I hope it's not this information that Fox News just refused to be reporting.
Well, again, there's stuff circulating on the internet.
Tom Foreman, CNN, Washington.
Thank you, Tom. Now, tonight,
Stand by for just one moment as we continue to watch pictures of the president's arrival in Brussels.
We want some reaction from Capitol Hill joining us now as we continue to look at these live pictures. To one side, on the other side of our screen is Republican Congressman Blake Farenthold of Texas. It is nice to have you here. And as we look at these pictures, let me just get you to weigh in because you are an attorney. And we learned overnight that the president is retaining, we're hearing, private counsel aside from White House counsel Mark Kasowitz, a big name attorney. Does it make sense to you, him bringing in private representation right now? Is it a smart move?
Listen, I'm happy it's going to save the taxpayers potentially some money.
So that's a fiscal conservative.
Absolutely.
Okay, But aside from that, in all honesty, look, we've seen this before when White Houses have been in crisis, in the Clinton administration around Iran-Contra, the Reagan administration. What does this signal to you? Is it a good move for this president?
I think it's a defensive move. Anybody, anybody who's facing some issues probably ought to have a lawyer. You know, the saying they teach us in law school is the person who represents themselves as a fool for a client. I don't think there's anything particularly there that Donald Trump needs to worry about, but when you've got people constantly pecking at you, you need some defense.
Now, constantly pecking at you, you actually have agreed with the president's framing of this. You agree that this is a witch hunt. Explain.
Well, we just saw in the Intelligence Committee yesterday, the chief of the CIA was asked, was there any evidence of collusion with the Russians on the part of the Trump campaign? And the answer, several times he was asked that, was no, there was not. Yet we still see the constant level of attacks. You see stories that are coming in based on anonymous sources.
Congressman, yesterday he was asked repeatedly if he saw evidence of collusion. He said he didn't deal with evidence. What he says is he saw intelligence which led him to believe there were contacts between Russia and people involved with the Trump campaign that raised questions that were unanswered when he left office, but he would not directly say he saw evidence there. It just gets the idea that there are these open questions.
Well, again, there you're going, taking the worst possible spin on
I'm just saying what he said. I'm not spinning. I'm just saying what he said.
Yeah.
That's all I'm doing.
You know, my takeaway from it was that there really wasn't any evidence of anything improper. And we are spending hours and hours in Congress with folks saying investigate this, investigate that, yet they're not willing to give the investigators, which we now have with our special counsel, the chance to investigate it. It's just
so,
a constant...
All right, you say we're taking the worst part, and that's your opinion. You're welcome to it. We watched the entire hearing, as it sounds like you did as well. Let me read you a quote from former CIA Chief John Brennan. By the time I left office on January 20th, I had unresolved questions in my mind as to whether or not the Russians had been successful in getting U.S. persons involved in the campaign or not to work on their behalf. Again, either wittingly or unwittingly, he went on to say, I saw interaction that raised question in my mind as to what was the true nature of it. That is more than just... you know, the worst part of it. That is what he said over and over again.
Again, he constant questioning. He was unable to point to any specific evidence. And I think that's what we're going to continue to see there. And my fear is our constant focusing on the Russians is deflecting away for some other things that we need to be investigating in. There's still some question as to whether the intrusion at the DNC server was an insider job or whether or not it was the Russians. Yet
What evidence? I'm sorry. The insider job, what are you referring to here? Because I hope it's not this information that Fox News just refused to be reporting.
Well, again, there's stuff circulating on the internet. My question is, why haven't the federal officials...
What's circulating on the internet that you think is worthy of a congressional investigation? Because the D.C. police are investigating this, and so far they haven't said there's any there.
Yet the D.C. police nor no federal investigator has ever had a look at the DNC computer. We're relying only on the report of somebody that the DNC contracted to examine their computer rather than having federal officials. To me, we need to let the feds look at it.
Congressman, do you think it's responsible to bring up, as a representative of the American people, to bring up things, in your words, that are swirling on the internet, and give it justification as if there's a there when we know nothing on that yet?
I think the same is true with what the media is doing with Trump. We're basing allegations on anonymous sources.
Okay, so do you mean quoting the former CIA director who said, quote, I saw evidence worthy of investigation by the Bureau to determine whether there was cooperation or collusion that was taking place?
I'm going back to the Comey memo. I'm going back to the Comey memo, which is based entirely on anonymous sources. So my overall point is this needs to be fully investigated.
Yes.
Let the professionals investigate it. Let's not try it in the media, which is serving from a distraction for what needs to be done in this country. That's fixing health care, that's getting people back to work, that's fixing taxes, that's securing the border. Instead, we're hearing a constant barrage of anti-Trump, I'm going to call it propaganda.
Well, okay, if the propaganda is coming from the former CIA director, if that's your opinion, you're entitled to it. If the FBI director, James Comey, says he wrote the memos, if he says it out loud from his mouth, will that be propaganda?
Again, I want to hear what Comey has to say. I want to hear the facts. I want to hear the information about it.
But to John's question, if the former FBI Director James Comey says, yes, indeed, I wrote those memos, as we have reported from multiple reliable sources, will that still be propaganda in your mind, Congressman?
No, it won't, but we need to hear the facts and circumstances associated with that memo. And I'll tell you, if he's such a big memo writer, there's some memos from the previous administration in the campaign that I'd like to see as well.
Congressman Blake Farenthold, I think we all agree we want to see people speak and see the evidence for ourselves out in public. We will reconvene this discussion after that point, because I think that'll be interesting to have a talk with you then, too.
I look forward to it.
Thank you, Congressman. In a second major